The kind of the doctrine of heathenism as a concept, as a religious belief, and how it applies to our day-to-day lives. So I was honestly just going to read through this PDF as kind of an introduction. Um, so the ultimate question is what is heathenism? And to answer that, we've got this wonderful PDF. So the pagan revival began in the 1960s. It saw the resurgence of the pre-Christian religions of Europe and the Middle East. Modern paganism includes the revived mystery schools of the Hellenic world, the Celtic religions of ancient Europe, Ireland and Scotland, and the European religion known as Wicca. On the edges of paganism came the recovery of Norse, German, and Anglo-Saxon beliefs. Modern pagans tried to fit them within their own format. Others decided to take the Germanic beliefs on their own merits, exclusive of precedents set by modern pagans. The result is a distinct religion which is very different in purpose, flavor, and structure from the ways of the modern pagan community. To distinguish itself from conventional paganism, the term heathenism was adopted. Though heathenism is indeed a pagan religion, it is distinct as a unique entity under the larger pagan umbrella. There have been several names coined for various heathen groups: Heathenskap, Ásatrú, Odinism, Thorism, Theotroth, Derglaw, and etc. Most of these terms relate to specific branches of heathenism. The term that covers all of them is heathenism. Though each branch itself is distinct, all have much in common than if they were on their own. So in discussing religion, most folks anticipate questions such as, what do you believe? People are ill prepared for the question, what will your belief do for me? Seeing a bunch of people worshiping Old Norse gods might look more like a medieval reenactment or an occult ceremony to others. It's more important that people know what heathenism does for us. In actual practice, the rites and ceremonies are a minor thing compared to living our beliefs every day. I'm going to pause right here. Any thoughts so far? Okay. So keep in mind that heathenism is indeed a powerful way of life. The ancient Saxons and Norsemen would rather be executed than convert. So obviously, heathenism offered them something for which it was worth living and dying for. The basic premise of the heathen is that everything spiritual is also practical. The goal of life is progress of the individual, the family, and mankind. In this quest, there can be no cross purposes pitting spiritual requirements against real-world necessity. Both work together for the betterment of all. Those familiar with the other religions of these times will find heathenism very different. Concepts common to conventional religions find no counterpart in heathen belief. We are unbound by many of the strictures which are part and parcel of the major religions of this time. We're bound by principles which guide us. These include honesty, responsibility, fairness, and generosity. Our principles encourage us to deal fairly with everyone, to do our best, and to live a life that makes a difference. There are no rules behind which to hide so as to excuse doing the minimum. We are urged to do our best and be our best. So that's kind of an overall view of the answer or possible answer to the question of what is heathenism. So the great thing in my mind is, it's, and we'll see this later on in the PDF. The great thing in my mind is it's a practical religion. It's one that applies to our day-to-day lives. That it's for the betterment of yourself, your family, and your community, and it's bound and intertwined in this way for the betterment of everything in your practical life. And that's one of the biggest things that draws me to heathenism. That's why I felt this pull, because I'm growing up very, very centered around family and providing for oneself and one's family. being very community involved. These are all, concepts that are very important to me. So to have that as an answer was very comforting. And to have this be kind of the one perspective of heathenism was very good. Yeah, what do you guys think? I think we have one more person trying to join too, so let me grab that real quick. All right, there we go. Okay, so we'll get back to, can you guys hear me? Perfect. Okay, just making sure. Okay, so why heathenism? Heathenism is not just another religion. For most people, a change in religion means swapping one set of rules, deities, and doctrines for another. That sort of change can appear significant, but it's actually superficial. The heathen difference is the degree of change. It is just not a matter of choosing a new format for one's spiritual life. It's a commitment to better life through initiative and understanding. Heathenism supports the individual's confidence to do and to act appropriately. For many, it is a drastic change from the self deprecating attitudes of conventional religion to the strong, secure individuality of heathenism. The goal of heathenism is for men and women to make a positive difference in their lives. The key word here is dynamic. Positive difference comes through dynamic thinking and action. It's fueled by faith in oneself, trust in life, and the rewards of living rightly. These are not the pie in the sky dreams of conventional religion, which promises rewards in an afterlife in exchange for suffering in this one. For heathens, the reward we earn in this life are evidence that there will be more available in the next. We prefer to take care of this life now, knowing that our future is the product of present actions. While heathenism stresses personal responsibility, it is a religion free of spiritual guilt. We deal directly with matters of right and wrong in a practical manner. We don't accept such concepts as sin, penance, and the need for atonement. These are the self humiliating trappings of someone else's religion. Likewise, we have no original sin or other doctrine stressing an inherent flaw in humankind. The heathen view sees humanity as good from the start. Wrong behavior brings its own consequences. No deity keeps count of our sins, and no sin stains the soul. The soul is not a tally marker subject to blemishes. We leave spiritual guilt to other religions. So heathenism promotes the idea here. Let's see here. Heathenism promotes the idea of the person as an individual who has the faculties to think, choose, and act for himself. We are not sheep waiting for a shepherd to show us the next thing we must do. We are men and women who can make our own decisions. Likewise, we do not accept the self deprecating humility that makes people behave like worms. Heathens stand tall before the gods. We enjoy pride in ourselves, our assets, and our accomplishments. We accept that we are worthy of all good. There is nothing in us that makes us anything less than human beings worthy of well being and dignity. That brings us to another benefit of heathen belief, a life of dignity. It is the nature of the heathen to set a higher standard for himself and live accordingly. Rather than hide behind a set of thou shalt nots, we aspire to principles which encourage us to act. The way of conventional religion is no, no, no. Our way is to accede to better by saying yes. We say yes to honesty, justice, generosity, and integrity. We say less to living. We say, let's see here. We say yes to living to a higher standard and enjoying dignity, respect, and satisfaction. The adherent of conventional religions apologizes for his work and says, It is because God wills it. The heathen feels satisfaction in his work and says, "It's because I did it." Of course, such a belief means that we cannot blame the gods for our shortcomings. We cannot hide behind a doctrine or take refuge in dogma. This is our life, and it is up to us to live it. The downside for lesser individuals is that there is no place to hide. There it is, what heathenism offers you. There are no idle promises. The focus is on you, and the payoff is that you get a life worth living. Heathenism frees you from the spiritual and emotional baggage of conventional religion. It's not for everyone, but it just might be the spirituality that you've been seeking. We're not into this religion to worship a bunch of comic book gods or live out some fantasy. We are into it because it inspires the best in us. What do you guys think about that passage? I think the big thing for me is that there are no, trappings. I like the word trappings there because it indicates, a very stark difference. Um, raised up Southern Baptist here in Louisiana, there's a lot of guilt and there's a lot of fear involved in Christianity. And the thing is, I know a lot of people who don't live that way, but unfortunately, in that system, it's very easy to manipulate that system into one of oppression, of fear, of anxiety, of never being good enough. And to have finally found a place where I can live a life of, integrity and feel good about myself. I don't have to worry about what other people think about me. I have to worry about how I stack up and how I rank within what I've set for myself and what the gods have set for me in my day to day. So Jared says that perfectly sums up how I feel, especially after a lifetime of forced Catholicism. Can definitely appreciate that. He says, I felt all that about the self-deprecation and humiliation and being servile. It's always felt wrong to me. Absolutely. Absolutely agreed. So let's here. So why the gods? Why the gods? So at first it might seem odd that we worship gods whose myths make them look like little more than oversized magical people. Myth is allegory. Just as Christians and Jews do not believe the world was actually created in 7 days, so we do not believe Thor is some great big man who swats monsters with his hammer. However, it's much easier for us to believe in a god who would be symbolized as a hammer-wielding champion than one who encourages us to be meek, poor, and servile. Give me 1 second, guys. So let's take an incident that happened many years ago. Several men were talking about the ancients. Talk went to the old gods, and the subject of Thor came up. You could see that the men liked it. They spoke with admiration for a god who exhibited such might. Then one of the fellows said, That might be so, but Jesus is the only. Immediately the men looked deflated. They agreed with him, but one could see that it was not because they felt it. It was as if they felt they had to agree about Jesus. Actions speak louder than words, and it was obvious that they were inspired by Thor and deflated by Jesus. Thor so inspired the Norsemen that most refused to convert when Christianity came. It took several wars, deceit, and much bloodshed to force Christianity on the Norse. Why refuse a religion if it were better? Once again, Thor inspired the people far more than Jesus. It is much easier to have faith in a God of action than one of passivity. The Norsemen were not ignorant barbarians. Most could write at a time when Christian Europe was rife with illiteracy. They were capable people at a time when the rest of the world was in its dark ages. They ruled a vast area from Scandinavia to large parts of Britain, Ireland, France, and what are now the Ukraine and Russia. So it's their faith in the gods. So it is that their faith in the gods is not born of ignorance, but of experience. The Norsemen of old were realists. Their experience showed that faith in the gods had practical results. Our gods inspire us. Though they are symbolized in an anthropomorphic way, we know that they are spiritual entities. Belief in their exact nature varies among heathens. Some see them as individual deities, others as facets of a greater divinity. There are those who view them as part of a divine hierarchy, and others who think they're little more than archetypes. Heathenism has no single doctrine and embraces all of these. Each person has to come to his or her own terms with the nature of the gods. Heathenism is not a dogmatic religion, but a way of life that allows alternatives. Most of us believe that the gods interact with us and work with us. They are friends who desire the best for us, whether we see them as aspects of one thing, distinct individuals, or as part of a holy hierarchy. The consensus is that they are favorable to us. Traditionally, people gravitate to the gods with which they feel the greatest affinity. This is based on the attributes of each deity, each of which has his own specialties. Tyr, the ancient god of war, is favored by soldiers and policemen. Freya, a nature goddess, is chosen by gardeners and cat lovers. Thor, the god of the individual, is a favorite of many people. By choosing favorite gods, we do not alienate the others. Beings of that magnitude are not offended by our choices. They do not feel slighted in the least. Gods are too vast and wise to be subject to such petty things as bickering, spite, and jealousy. For those raised in religions where the god is demanding and prone to retribution, this may seem strange. To heathens, it's perfectly logical. Why would gods who love us want to hurt us? If the gods are our friends and they are so overwhelmingly wise and understanding, why would they want to punish us for petty things? Things like sin and salvation and judgment day are alien to heathenism. If you think about it, such concepts stand in direct opposition to the concept of a loving God. Again, we separate the myths and folk tales from the reality. Though the gods and myths may seem capricious and petty, we know these stories are allegories. In myths, the gods are used as actors in a play rather than as their real nature. What we contact are the spiritual gods rather than mythic characters. To compare our gods with the conventional monotheistic deity would be misleading. The deity believed by Christians, Jews, and Muslims is thought to be an entirely different nature. It is transcendent, a distant deity that lives separate from its creation. It's jealous, capricious, and vindictive. Our gods are not only transcendent, but close at hand. They are not separate from this world. In fact, this world is as spiritual as any other because of the presence of the gods. We believe that our gods are friendly to us and seek out betterment. So, what are your thoughts on the gods? I'd love to hear what you think about this little passage here. So Jared says a God that requires requires servility and all of the other negative attributes that we've talked about of its followers is no God. What kind of being needs to create intelligent life and force it to worship it by the threat of eternal suffering? That is no God. I believe they're real and independent of each other. I've felt them. They're definitely not ideas or archetypes for me. I see and feel them everywhere. Funny enough, I actually tend to lean towards what you're saying, Jared. Um, I think, there's stranger things that have happened in this world um, that you could feel comfortable saying, yes, they're definitely a lot more significant than an archetype. I've had several encounters with Thor. Several times he's kept me safe, and other gods have played their parts in my life as well. So definitely see and feel them everywhere. Definitely do agree with that and lean more towards that for sure. Absolutely. So let's see here. And the great thing is too, what I feel about this passage is like, since it's an anti-dogmatic religion, you know, I mean, there's no real right or wrong way to experience the gods or experience the religion. I think most would agree that they can see and feel the God's presence. But hey, if somebody wants to view it as an archetype, have at it. All more power to you. That's how you experience heathenism. It's not technically wrong, you know. I like that it's open. I like that it's fluid. I like that it can fit whatever your experience is. And that's one of the biggest things that I appreciate about heathenry or heathenism in general. So we've talked about, why heathenism, what is heathenism, why the gods. Next up, we're going to tackle a pretty interesting concept here, and that is some people pronounce it weird. The Y in Old Norse would kind of be kind of impress upon me to pronounce it more like word. So the Y there should probably be pronounced like a surfer dude saying dude. So it'd be more like weird. Doesn't really matter. What it does cover is the concept of fate or destiny. In the old myths and sagas, we hear of men who deal with fate or destiny. They may strive against fate or some such thing. Fate, destiny. Does that mean our lives are preordained? By fate and destiny, they mean word or urd. Word is the mechanism by which life proceeds forward. It is an inexorable force, an eternal principle. It's often translated as fate. However, word does not predestine our lives. Our fate is not forced on us. Through word, we have the means to make our own fate. Destiny is not something that happens to us. Destiny is something we help create. Our actions today determine our destiny in the future. However, this is not karma that repays us in kind. Word has been likened to a loom. There's the forward motion, and there is also the cross weave. Word is a river that carries us in a general direction, but we steer the boat. By changing course, we change where the river takes us. Our actions indeed set in motion the general destination. If we change what we do, we might change our destination. It is through word that we are connected with our higher purpose. Because of word, our life is not aimless. We each have a destiny to create. Word is the vehicle by which we do it. Each of us is his own helmsman on the river of word. We can choose to coast passively or steer our course. Our fate is in our hands. You guys feel about fate and destiny? Jared says, I believe in fate and the Norns. It's comforting for me and helps me have less anxiety in stressful or scary situations. I can just sort of say what is, and not be afraid because what will happen no matter what. Very true. Very, very true. I've always liked that idea. Where did it, likening it to traveling on a river, um, changing what we do, changing the future. I believe that there is a general fate out there for everyone. I think we have a general path. Of course, the norms being responsible for fate, things that have happened, things that will happen, things that are happening now. Um, taking matters into your own hands definitely does. In a results-driven religion, you can't ignore the fact that if you change something about your life, it will change the direction your life goes, without a doubt. But I like also the comfort of knowing there is a general fate, a general destiny, kind of the big picture type deal, um, framed up within Norse heathenism. So Alex says, I was trying to word it in a way that made sense, but that's pretty much what I was thinking. What's going to happen will happen no matter what. Jared says it also takes a lot of the worry and guesswork out of life for me. No matter how hard Odin tries, he'll still be consumed by Fenrir. He can't escape it. Yeah, I've definitely, that's an interesting perspective, because I think too, like, yeah, and I think it would fit within that general framework of fate, right? There are unchangeable landmarks, no matter how many variations in your life happen. There are landmarks. I don't think you can escape them. They're set in the web by the Norns, for good or for bad. Those things will happen, and they shape who you are. So no matter how hard you try, no matter what you do, there are specific markers in your fate that have to happen. Absolutely. So we're man, we could sit here and talk about fate for the rest of tonight. Um, I do want to move on to heathen attitudes. So, which this is probably my favorite part of this PDF. So, being a good heathen is far different from being a good Christian. Admired attributes include honesty, integrity, and an even temperament, good judgment, and courage. Heathen ethics are not a set of rules to follow, but time honored principles to be lived. The heathen cannot hide behind the excuse that he did what the laws required. Right means doing the best thing, not just the correct thing. Life is too vast to be confined to a rigid set of rules. Something greater is needed. Heathen ethics looks at results, not an arbitrary adherence to some man-made code. A person's actions and accomplishments speak the loudest. While it's nice to draw from eldritch lore, it is just as wise to look at modern examples. So here's a good example here of heathen attitudes and how it compares to one of the most popular modern religions. A Christian couple worked very hard to gain their degrees in college. Both were in the scientific and engineering fields. In a flash of piety, they both decided to become missionaries. They were sent to Guatemala, a hostile region of horrid jungle, civil war, disease, and poverty. These two had the assignment of translating the Bible into an obscure dialect spoken by a small tribe of Guatemalan Indians. They spent some 20 years there and had 5 children. All their reports were of continuing hardships. Though they tried to help the people, everything was routinely overturned by a variety of problems. Disease, tropical storms, military incursions, and more made their lives hellish. A Christian might consider the sacrifices of this couple to be a sign of devotion and piety. They would think it all very good. A heathen would regard them as irresponsible fools. First of all, the couple denied their own offspring a healthy and decent place to live. They subjected their children to unnecessary danger, even though there was ample opportunity to live in a much better environment. This has also negated future opportunities for the children. To a heathen, such lack of concern for offspring merely for an odd ideal is irresponsible. After all, how can a person be of use to others if he neglects his own family? The Christians would also be considered foolish for pursuing a meager task at great risk. The ridiculousness of translating a book at the expense of living fully just does not make sense. Sacrifice for what? The very lack of appreciable results alone would condemn the expedition as a fool's errand. Heathens put home and family first. It's the only reason that a person gives his own kin and hearth the best. The fellow who does good deeds for the entire community is less respected than the fellow who does best for his own household. What is the point of earning good if it's not to be used for those held nearest and dearest? Heathens also believe that a person's value is in what he does. Rich or poor, the one who does right is esteemed more than the one who has much. Christianity teaches that poverty is a virtue. Heathenism believes that virtue cannot be measured by the quantity or lack of possessions, but lies elsewhere. A wise rich man is regarded better than a foolish poor man. It's not in wealth, but wisdom or folly that good is determined. The Hofemal, a book of the Poetic Eddas, provides much information on practical ethics and common sense. To the heathen, a code of ethics must partake of practical reality. Unrealistic ideals are folly. Only those things which work can be considered right. Of course, there's more to being right than just satisfying the whims of the moment. Our ancestors forged their ethics through shrewd observation of human nature with a view to the principle of cause and effect. Those who indulge such shortcomings as lying, deceit, and unfairness always seem to place themselves in an unhappy position. Whether ostracized by the community or trapped in their own wiles, deceivers inevitably came to unhappy conclusions. This was also true of violent souls whose only way of dealing was by causing pain. Violent men eventually found every hand against them. Causers of strife never had a moment's peace. This is not to say that heathens are pacifists. A good man or woman was more than able to take a stand. Violent men could only be overthrown by violence. Heathens recognized that there were times when force was necessary. They also had the requisite discretion to know just when force was required. At all other times, there were more peaceful alternatives. Contrary to popular myth, the ancient heathens were not a pack of bloodthirsty savages. They enjoyed and organized a lawful society. Within society, violence was disdained. Against outside opponents, the ancient heathens proved ferocious warriors. It is true that there are Viking raids amongst monasteries and settlements in the British Isles and the coasts of Europe. To this day, heathens do not care that monasteries and churches were raided. After all, the Christians were foolish in having such places in the first place. While Christendom was in its dark ages, the heathens were on the move. It was only by forcing Christianity on the heathens that they were held in check. The superior culture of the North could only be impeded by religious pollution and ecclesiastical enslavement. Heathen ethics play heavy emphasis on common sense. I'm going to pause here for a moment for any thoughts, comments, concerns, solutions. So Jared says, I don't want to generalize, but most Christians I've met have been the most two-faced, backstabbing, untrustworthy, gossiping people I've ever met. You know, it's hard because I know a lot of good Christian people, but you're right. At the same time, and to be truthful, it's less about what kind of personality they have and more about how they bastardize Christianity to serve some of the worst things that they can portray, or how it can serve specifically them. And I think, one, that's irresponsible if that's going to be how you choose to represent your faith. And then two, it brings about a more broader critique of Christianity, where it's a system which within you can act this way, and it's not necessarily accepted, but it's placed in this gray area, right? Because, oh yes, that's not the right way to act, but Jesus forgives all, so you're in the clear. And I can't rationalize that. I can't come to terms with that on a good level, because I think that, right is right and wrong is wrong. And if you're going to act wrong, then it needs to be called wrong. And if you're going to act right, then that needs to be celebrated. And I think that too often I've met many Christians as well, that take advantage of Christianity, change it into something that I don't think its original authors intended. And it becomes a nightmare to interact with that person. Absolutely, Jared. He says, I like the way heathens have almost a code of honor, ethics, and morals, and hold each other accountable and call each other out, at least in my experiences. Absolutely. 100%. One of my favorite things about heathenism, and the Ásatrú community in general, which is, if you are messing up, people will call you out. And it's always done from, it's the great, at least in my experience, okay, but the great thing for me is that if you are called out, it's not like you're about to be thrown into exile. It's literally just like, hey, dude, this is a pretty hot take, right? Like, oh, like, wait a second, we don't talk about other people this way. And it's not like, it's not, you're not being thrown into exile. It's not like, go away, we never want to talk to you again. But if it's wrong, it is wrong. I like that. Yeah, absolutely. I don't need to go in a closet with the man to tell me I'm messing up. My friends do it for me. Yeah. Hell yeah. Absolutely. Let's see here. Um, yeah, heathen ethics places heavy emphasis on common sense. Wisdom is expressed in terms of results. Self-control, the willingness to tend one's needs, and a feeling of concern for the well-being of one's fellows is central to heathenism. Perhaps the best word for it is caring. Heathens care that things are done right. They care enough to make things easier for others too. Heathens won't leave obstacles or unnecessary work for others. A heathen cares enough to be neat, sociable, and courteous. He will carry his trash to the next wastebasket rather than litter the streets. He will move a fallen limb out of the roadway so that others won't drive into it. An example of the hard side of heathen ethics happened in Norway. In a small bygd, the locals enjoyed feeding the eider ducks. A hunter, knowing this, lay in wait and shot a few of the half-tame fowl. The people were incensed. Had the hunter sought his prey elsewhere, there would have been no problem. And using the bygd, he broke the common rule of decency. The people decided to duck the hunter into a pool. After a few dunkings, he was released and warned not to return. Heathens have nothing against hunting, to the contrary. Yet even though hunting is done solely for the food, there are still rules. Animals that are like pets are regarded by all as off limits. Heathens like to hunt and fish. Their one rule is that anything hunted must be useful. Deer, elk, and reindeer provide food, fur, and workable bone. To this day, farmers in Norway make use of every part of the deer. Waste is regarded as wrong. What a contrast to the anti-hunters of America and Britain. Most anti-hunters regard animals as cute, fuzzy creatures. Cute? Animals are rarely so genteel. Anyone who understands animals knows that even the smallest creatures can be ferocious. Those cute bears can kill a man with one swipe of the paw. The harmless squirrel can bite a finger in two. Heathens know animals as they are, not as others would make of them. Heathens also like to make things pleasant. In early times, all wooden and bone objects were carved and painted. The spare hours of long winter nights provided plenty of time to make art out of common objects. This has persisted right until modern times. So let's see here. Before we get into this next thought pattern, any thoughts, comments, concerns, solutions here?
Sorry, I'm jumping in late. What is the book that we're reading right now?
All good. So this is let's see here. Let me see which page I'm on, page 11. So this is a PDF that kind of gives some definition to heathenism by the author of Schill. First released in 1992 and looks like it was re-released maybe with some modifications in 2008. So it's more along the lines of kind of an introduction to the idea, the concept of heathenism as a religious belief. So I wanted to get through this and obviously, take what you can from it. Obviously, everyone has their own take on what is heathenism. Some things we may agree with, some things we may not. I felt when I read it that it was a pretty decent synopsis, so to say. Yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Absolutely. And in fact, they have a passage coming up here shortly that we're going to have to kind of, take with a grain of salt. I still want to read it so that we can see what's out there, but I also want to highlight some of the somewhat thinly veiled negative sides to popular belief on heathenism.
Okay.
I think in my short time, Alex, I would definitely agree with you. Alex says, love the hunting part. There's a difference between just killing animals for the hell of it and hunting with the purpose of using everything, every part of the animal. Definitely would 100% agree with that. I know that, in our midst, we have people who take that feeling to a very personal level. We have people who don't even eat meat in our religion. That's a-okay. But I think if you are going to use meat or use an animal, you should definitely look to use every single part of the animal that you can. Not only is that right, but it's respectful and it's responsible. And oftentimes, honestly, when you go through a hunting course in the United States anyway to get your certification, that bit's also emphasized even from like a non-religious perspective. If you're going to hunt for a purpose, hunt to use the animal. And then when you have that animal, use every part of it that you can. Absolutely. Okay, so let's dig in here. We're going to get into some soft topics, like not very well defined words here. So let's see what we have. Beauty is one motivation of heathenism. Ugliness is deplored. Ugliness is seen as the result of uncaring and sloppy acts. A half-hearted approach to life and endeavors results in ugliness. Shoddy workmanship is an example. Trash and blight are among the others. Heathens work to bring more of life's beauty into their own homes instead. Christianity preaches that poverty is virtue and that material things are considered base. Heathens believe that wealth is fine so long as the person uses it wisely. Wealth is an excellent servant but a horrid master. Owning nice things is one of the prerogatives of life. Well-being can indulge niceties. Luxury is not a way of life, but an occasional benefit of living rightly. Those who live for luxury have missed the point and are no better than those who worship their wealth. Those who appreciate luxury as an occasional benefit gain the most from it. Heathens own things. The preference is for things which will provide good service. If they also be ornamental, that is all better. Poverty serves nobody. To adopt poverty when abundance is available helps nothing. It won't help the poor. One doesn't abet the impoverished by climbing into the gutter. Things are available to those who can get them. Those who can should take no shame in doing so. The Christian tendency to be ashamed of affluence is folly. A person should make no excuse for wealth. If he has it, he should take pride in his success. What are your thoughts here?
I would agree that heathenry takes a very different view on materialism than Christianity does. Um, Materialism isn't a bad thing in heathenry. When we work on our altars or our ritual garb and things like that, we do we can to have beautiful things in order to make that space beautiful as well as sacred.
I'd agree, Corey. And I think too, like one of the reasons I kind of wanted to be throw a disclaimer out there. I think also, heathenry in general is a very challenging way of life. It's a challenging mindset. It's focused on our actions, right? And at the same time, I don't feel that I appreciate this author for defining what they mean by ugly and beautiful, because depending on your personal experience, saying that we don't like ugly and we promote beautiful, I think is you have to define what those words mean. Depending on personal experience, that can be very troublesome to some people, body image wise and other areas of life, right? So, um, but I do agree. Like, we want things to look nice. We want things to be pretty. Who doesn't, right? But I think as far as like the materialism goes, yeah, if you have it, you should use it. If you can get it, go and get it. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong at all.
They don't mention it here, but one of my favorite funny historical facts is that when the British were talking about invading Vikings, and one of their main issues with it, um, they complained about Viking men being clean and having their beards, combed and decorated, and that it was a threat to women's virtue because the men were clean and women preferred that. And I think that goes into this.
It it does, and I know which account you're talking about, and it is pretty funny because I think also at the same time, Christian women were leaving their husbands to be with Norsemen because they, man, when the bar's so low that man, this guy takes a bath once a week. That's the dude right there. Oh boy, we have definitely progressed as a species.
Sadly, there's some truth to that in modern times too.
Oh, yeah. Ouch. Man, that one gives me the giggles. Jared says, definitely agree with that. Always take pride in your successes and achievements. Don't flaunt it necessarily, but be proud. Absolutely. One of the biggest statements in the Havamal is don't be showy with your wisdom, right? It implies that you have wisdom. You don't have to flaunt it, but if you can get it, get it. Yeah, let's see here. So what of sex? If kids are around, you might want to be careful with this portion. We're going to talk about sex in regards to heathenism. Um, Sexuality as within heathenry is definitely something that we want to take a look at. A lot of us are heathen parents or soon to be or plan to be. You're going to influence the next generation. How do we feel about sexuality? This is one take of it. So Judeo-Christian civilization has a difficult time with sex. Centuries of a policy of prudery have made a mess. This mess is particularly bad in America and English-speaking countries. The northern lands are generally free of the sexual quagmire. Heathens are neither prudes nor libertines. Sex is as much a part of life as eating and sleeping. It has its place and time. There should be no shame in sex. It's good when pursued wisely. Those just breaking from the Christian sex trap often find themselves going to the other extreme. Licentiousness and excess are as bad as celibacy. Heathenism applauds discretion and common sense. Enjoy it, but don't be foolish about it. I found that pretty straightforward, pretty clean cut. What do you guys think about that? I'm assuming this portion, this PDF is written from a heteromonogamous point of view, right? We have definitely still made, yet again, still made progress as a species. So bear in mind, this is definitely, I've read through it a couple of times. It's definitely written from a heteromonogamous point of view. But yeah, let's keep trudging forward. Marriage is part and parcel of heathen lore. Marriages are based on mutual trust and faithfulness. Without the ban on premarital sex as enforced by Christianity, heathens marry for more than just the privilege of a roll in the hay. In fact, heathen loyalty to one's spouse is far stronger than that of the monotheists. Marriage is essential in a family religion. The family is the integral unit of heathen life. While families have become distanced in America, family ties still remain strong in Scandinavia. Blood has meaning. Relatives have an obligation to each other. In Norway, this extends to distant cousins. It's quite a contrast to the erosion of the family seen in America and some parts of Europe. Again, this one, that last statement, I'm not sure what the author means by this. It's not clearly defined. I'm assuming the rate of divorce, torn families, things like that. I don't know. But as far as family loyalties go, I mean, when you wrap up your in America, there's at least from my perspective, there's a number of things that you could sacrifice your family to, or your bond to your family to. My personal one, my favorite, Christianity. People will definitely, especially in the Bible Belt here in South Louisiana, sacrifice any and all work towards making a solid family unit to being as involved with their religion as possible. There's other things that the family unit can be sacrificed to. It's just it's kind of one of those things. But definitely family is probably, if not the most significant, one of the more significant ethical codes to heathenism. And again, specific one thought process with the definition of marriage. There's implications here to what they mean by a family unit. My personal belief, family doesn't have to be blood. Family is a shared commitment to another person. There's about 1,000,001 different ways to define a family, but within heathenism and heathenry in general, the focus on making sure that your family, whoever that is taken care of by you as a heathen is one of the highest ethical codes that we must adhere to. In an anti-dogmatic religion, there's not many sets of rules that we follow, but I think it would be fair to say that if there were any codes, taking care of your family would be pretty damn high on the list. What do you guys think?
I would say that family definitely ranks quite highly as a value in heathenry. Um, when you read this passage, it made me think of family familial estrangement. Um, so where, you know, not knowing your cousins very well, or having a falling out with your parents or a sibling and just not having them in your life. Or also, the US is huge. So, like, if I were to drive to go visit one of my sisters, it would take 28 hours. We live so far away, it's hard to keep in touch. And so that is something that happens in the US. Most of um, most other countries are not that large. So there's not that amount of distance um, separating and possibly estranging people.
Yeah, I agree. I think too, in reference to, having a fallout with a mom or dad or sibling, there's times when even as a heathen, you have to redefine what family means to you. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be blood. I have family ties to people that I share no ancestral link with. It's family as a concept is really an interesting one that probably could be spent this better part of the evening talking about. um, Family as a concept is broad and loosely defined, but I think everyone knows what a family link, family bond would feel like, and I think one of the things that the author is pointing to here that is reflected in the lore is if you have that bond, if you have that link, you should nurture it, and you should keep it maintained and keep it healthy and keep it well. Um, but yeah, I mean it's not an easy conversation for everybody, and it's not because I mean people have fallings out with their family members about the pettiest of things. It's wild out there. So Alex says family definitely comes first, and agree with that. Family does not necessarily mean blood. In fact, the ones that I call my family are not blood at all. Only speak with one blood relative. The rest I do not speak with. Jared says definitely had to redefine it here. We live in a time where we can choose our family. There's no lands and titles to pass down and inherit anymore. LOL. Yeah, yeah. Like I said, it could be the variables on what defines a family are broad and ever increasing. Yep. But if you have that link, you should definitely nurture it. So let's see here. Being a family religion, heathenism has a strong fertility component. This also bears out from its origin as a farmer's religion. The heathen still recognizes his relationship with the land. He sees himself as part of the earth. The recognition of the balance between male and female is that of reciprocal parts working together. This goes from the family to the society. Though men and women have certain essential differences, they are innately equal. In earlier times, each had certain roles. By the nature of things, it was expedient that the wife tended the home and children while men worked the fields or took to fishing, trading, etc. Each ruled his or her place. A king had to have a queen and vice versa. Heathens then as now recognize certain differences in biology and temperament as essential. The trend toward equality in modern times has also been rife with the attempt to deny any factors of gender. In this mess, people lose some of their identity. In ancient times, women worked some trades which we later considered quote unquote male only. They helped in the fields, participated in fishing, and worked other trades alongside the men. This is not unusual in rural areas. Christianity's work to diminish the role of the female never quite took hold in the North. While other nations struggle with equal rights, the northern lands just shrug their shoulders. Northerners cannot understand why others have such a problem adjusting. As for war, heathens realize that such things do happen. A person should be ready to come to the defense of his community. There are also times when wrongdoers can only be restrained by might of arms. While violence and hostility are thought foolish, times of danger may require force. The heathen takes each person on his or her own merits. It is not who a person is, but what he does, which counts. Whatever the person's ancestry or background, it is his own actions which determine his worth as an individual. Heathenism is ever fair, rewarding good with good and requiting evil with justice. Modern theories of racism are alien to heathenism. What matters a person's ethnicity if he conducts himself in an honorable manner? Integrity is the real judge of character. Heathen ethics are fair, reasonable, and practical. In their way, they are firmer than the arbitrary rules of monotheistic religion. The heathen has greater freedom, yet embodies a greater personal sense of responsibility. Doing good is not enough. Doing better is essential. Others may be wrong, and the situation may be wrong, but the true heathen will not let anything keep him from doing what he knows to be right. So before we get into magic and divination, any thoughts here?
Yes.
Go for
So,
it.
on the previous page, it talked about a modern move to ignoring or devaluing gender. And I think that ignores some of the lore about gender and about there being a place in between male and female, and a flexibility of gender. If nothing else, anyone can look at Loki and even Odin, that gender is not a fixed thing, and it's not essential for it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, one person's take on things, but yeah, all you have to do is look into the lore just a tiny little bit, and it's not a fixed thing. It's very fluid, and that's okay. And I do appreciate that about heathenism. Yep. I think that was one of Odin's biggest critiques because he also practiced Sather, which was, from the Norse perspective, a feminine practice, and he was in somewhat of disdain for that. But at the same time, you can't take Odin and say like, oh, because he practiced Sather, he's no longer one of the Aesir. He has to go into exile, things of that nature. It's not a fixed thing, and I think it varies from case to case too, and authors as well. How they feel about it. But no, it's not a fixed thing. It's not essential for it to be. It's not a fundamental thing. I think these like definitions of gender and sexuality within heathenism um, are celebrated as fluid. They're celebrated as what they are. We have fertility goddesses. We have depictions of certain gods with phalluses. So definitely like some identifiers for sexuality, gender, that entire band of conversation. And at the same time, you've got things as crazy as a god transforming into a horse and giving birth to an eight-legged horse after being impregnated. Um, Someone who is thought as typically masculine, and promoted as such within the new Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yeah, it can be all over the place, and that's okay. It's 100% acceptable. It can be whatever it wants to be. Any other thoughts?
I think that it's most accurate to say that male and female as gender are celebrated, but not to the exclusion of other expressions.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, here's the fun stuff, magic and divination. Magic is the use of spiritual forces to create change. It is not a mumbo jumbo thing. Magic operates on principles. Does it seem strange? People do not question when conventional modern religions do the same thing. Is blessing religious medals, handkerchiefs, and holy oil any different than that of charging an amulet? Is having a religious service to pray for a specific intention all that different from casting a spell for the same thing? If you look at it with cold objectivity, you can see how conventional ideas of blessing and praying are essentially the same as magic. Heathenism has many tools for magical work. Among them are many old spoken spells and invocations for various purposes. These are similar to prayers. We also have the runes. The powerful spiritual forces have been categorized and symbolized in the old runic alphabet. It serves as a system to organize and to allow us to understand and use these various forces. The runes are also an excellent tool for understanding ourselves and our world. They're very important to us. Another thing we do with runes is divination. This is the use of magical means to forecast the future and to uncover things which may be unknown to us at the moment. You may be familiar with the tarot, which is used to foretell the future. We do this with runes. The result is like a weather forecast. We can use that information to our advantage. Does that seem odd? Many people have their own omens and portents, be it dreams of uncanny events or some such thing. Have you ever had a dream that came true? Have you ever had a hunch or gut feeling that proved correct even when everything else said it would never happen? That same thing that warned you is what we use in divination. The use of magic and divination varies throughout heathenism. There are people who are ardent practitioners of both arts and people who want nothing to do with either of them. Most heathens are somewhere in between. Whatever way they believe, we are practical about it. For example, though there are many healing spells within magic, a heathen would never refuse medical help. Cast your spells on the way to the hospital. Magic is always backed with practical action. We believe that magic is a help, not a substitute for direct action. Magic and divination are there for those who want them. They are not required. In fact, we do not even require that people believe in them. In heathenism, much is up to individual preferences rather than a hard and fast dogma. Belief or disbelief in magic and divination does not affect the sincerity of one's heathenism. I tend to disagree, but would like to hear from you.
I'm curious how you disagree.
I disagree on the point of, you don't, let me get this right. So it's the end that I disagree with. Magic and divination are there for those who want them. They are not required. I would agree with that. In fact, we do not even require that people believe. I don't know as much, I don't think I disagree with the statements. I think I disagree with the implication. So, if you look at any of the lore, any of the texts that we're going to look at here in the future, a lot of this stuff is steeped in magic, like a lot. I mean, gosh, some of the stories revolve entirely around magic and magical happenings. So I don't know that I mean, I'm not here to make a stand and say like someone is or isn't a true heathen, but I think, at the bare minimum, acknowledgement that magic exists and that it impacts the stories that we learn from and in some ways impacts the lives we live, would definitely be something I would promote. And I don't think I would necessarily agree with the fact that, or the implication rather that, like it's there, but oh, you don't have to believe it. It is what it is. It's like, well, a lot of this stuff is steeped in magic. I guess you don't. I mean, it's not required, but it's kind of. I think it would be more along the lines of ignorant if you did not acknowledge or refuse to acknowledge that a lot of the stuff is steeped in magic and divination, and it impacts a pretty significant portion of heathenism. That's where I would disagree.
Okay, that's fair. I would say that being a practitioner is not essential, and truly grasping or understanding magic is not essential. Um, a lot of people are like, magic is this mythical thing, and it's part of the mythos and part of the faith, but it's not something that I do or understand or feel. And I think that's valid and true for some people.
I would agree with that too. Yeah. Jared says we believe in it. We believe in and use magic and divination. We think it is essential that we do some blend of Wicca and heathenry, usually Wicca true. I think there are many different paths and methods, and none are wrong or right. 100% for that. I agree with that. I think it's more important to at least acknowledge its existence and or influence. Yeah. And again, I mean, it's not here to paint a picture for anyone. Your views are your own, and they're all accepted under the umbrella of heathenism. Um, but definitely the implications, some of the prior implications too. But again, I could sit here and pick it apart. Let's see here. Next up is the warrior. Most people associate the Old Norse gods with Viking warriors. The reason is simple. All the best of the existing old lore hails from the late Viking age. Add the fact that every Norwegian, Dane, and Swede likes to think that deep down inside he is a Viking. Suddenly we go from religion to Vikings. Whew. Much can be said about that portion. There's a warrior aspect within heathenism. This much is true. We appreciate the place of soldiers, naval sailors, and policemen in our society. Their work is as sacred as any other at the same time. Heathenism has always had a place for the warrior, and this goes back to the times when any man could be called upon to defend the community in battle. Of course, we're realists. Most of us are not warriors. Back in the old days, people were farmers, hunters, fishermen, traders, and blacksmiths. Today, we can add thousands of other occupations from computer geeks to typesetters to crane operators. Most of our professions are civilian in nature. This is not to say that we ignore the warrior aspects in ourselves. Many of us have prior military experience. Many of us are capable of defending ourselves and our families. There is another aspect of self-reliance. On the other hand, we're not bullies. We do not seek or encourage violent encounters. Violent attacks on others are reprehensible to us. We feel that if people have strong violent urges, they ought limit them to combative sports or take up a career in the military. We respect soldiers, sailors, and airmen for putting their safety on the line to protect our country. Yoo-hoo, nationalism here. We also respect the sacrifice of such civil servants as policemen, firemen, and medical rescue personnel for the risks they take. This much is true. Heathens have great respect for all veterans. We acknowledge that their sacrifices made it possible to live as we do today. The statement on face value is true. Definitely see some American nationalism in here, but I digress. There are a few heathens who find sport in trying to reenact the battle skills of the Viking Age. We see it much as any other hobby. They're not trying to recreate the Viking Age, but we do respect it as part of the heathen heritage. Those who choose to reenact are allowed to do so. Those of us who do not reenact are content to let others have their fun. It's another form of self-expression to the heathen. Okay. Any thoughts, comments, concerns about the prior before we get into the gods?
I definitely have some mixed feelings about the glorification of law enforcement. Um,
Absolutely. Nope.
I'm like, okay, this is written 20, 30 years ago, like, fine. But uh, that's definitely not something that I agree with or practice.
Yeah.
And I do, however, like how it says that we, appreciate and support veterans rather than appreciating and supporting the military, because those aren't the same thing.
No, they're not.
Supporting service members is different than supporting a problematic military system.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do appreciate that it mentioned reenactment, because there are definitely groups that are like, well, if you don't dress up in like period authentic garb, like how can you call yourself a heathen? I'm like, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Also, like, aesthetically, that's not my thing. I work with Freya, and most period Viking garb just is not my jam.
As much as true. So Jared considers himself a historical reenactor. I've seen some of his reenactment pictures. They are epic. But again, I think it's kind of when you get into that strange space of, and I honestly, I think it has to do with Christian mental baggage, because we get into these weird spaces of trying to dogmatize heathenism. So you have the strange people that are like, well, if you don't believe in magic, you can't call yourself a true heathen. Like to throw that. There's people like to, you know, throw that true heathen phrase around a lot. So I don't know, but yeah, I don't think that. Well, and I know Jared, you don't feel this way, but you don't have to reenact or wear period accurate garb to be considered a true heathen. That's a really weird space, but it does exist for some reason. Um, no, absolutely, absolutely. So Jared says, for me, it just helps me out, helps me put myself into things like rituals more. I don't see it as a requirement by any means at all, but for me, it helps. I would agree with that. I think when I start to call on any of the gods or embrace any of the rituals, I do find personally that for me, and it may just be a Christian mental baggage thing, but for me, if I can find something historically accurate to wear for that ritual or to call on that God, to me it feels more sacred. And I am aware and recognize that that is a Christian mental baggage thing, but hey, to each their own, I suppose. Yeah, I've definitely done floats in tunics. I try and stay away from turning it into cosplay. It's definitely not that. But I think if I'm calling on ancient rituals for me, pulling ancient practices and what ancient people would wear, kind of helps me get into that headspace a little bit easier as well. Yeah. But it's not a requirement. Like you can post a bloat in a t-shirt, nobody cares.
I think to me, it's about the intention of the clothing,
Yeah.
not its historical tie. Like, I make my own ritual clothing for the most part and have very intentional outfits, but that's about what makes me feel spiritual and what feels good to me, not about history.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's see here. So here we have a list of the gods. Every book that I've read from a modern, or almost every book, I've read two books now. Let me rephrase that. I've read two books now. This one and another. that include a list of the gods and their attributes. So here's a partial list. We know Odin as the chief deity. He generally appears as an old man in a blue cloak wearing a wide-brimmed hat or a long hood. He's usually accompanied by 2 ravens and 2 wolves, Hugin, Munin, Gerdi, and Freki, respectively. Invoke Odin for matters of, here's a suggestion, invoke Odin for matters of wisdom, learning magic, solving problems, deciphering difficult things, and creating opportunity. Odin is Lord of the Crossroads. He can also be invoked to help the dead reach Asgard. Last one, on base of the lore, I reject. Last statement there. He can also be invoked to help the dead reach Asgard. Not sure that that's a real thing. That sounds like Catholicism. But anyways, we'll find out, I guess. Frigga, Odin's wife, she appears as a middle-aged woman who is either spinning yarn, weaving, knitting, or tending children. Frigga is regal and bearing. Invoke her as a suggestion in matters of motherhood, children, homes, safety, and assuaging grief. Frigga is very subtle. Next up, we have Thor, or Ásatrú, god of thunder. He is pictured as a red-bearded fellow, brandishing a hammer and riding a goat cart through the skies. Thor rules weather, storms, lightning, electricity, overcoming obstacles, individual initiative, personal ethics, and expanding order. A nail driven into the crossbeam with 3 strokes is Thor's nail. It dissolves discord and instills calmness and order. Invoke him as a suggestion in matters of personal integrity, initiative, individual ventures, protection, weather, and travel by automobile or aircraft. Siv, goddess of the farm and home. Siv has bright blonde hair and often wears light blue. She's often seen spinning yarn as well. Invoke Siv for matters of binding and joining, the farm, crops, safety, calm, and attraction. Siv ensures a good harvest. She is Ásatrú's wife. Next up, we have Tyr, god of battle and justice. Tyr appears as a soldier in a red tunic with polished steel armor. He usually carries a sword or a spear. One hand is missing. Tyr is a bringer of justice and of victory over opposition. Invoke him in matters of restoring justice, getting to the truth, defense, competition, opposition, victory, and success. Be careful. Tyr is just, but is not one to keep the peace. Next up, we have Njord, god of harbors, coasts, and ships. Njord is a rough-visaged, huge fellow with simple manners and astute insight. He likes to be called Onkel, Norse for uncle. Njord can be invoked for matters of sea travel, ships, navigation, fishing, and prosperity. He can stop storms, rough seas, and fires. Next up, we have Frey, god of nature, horses, and boars. Frey appears as a strong young man riding a horse or golden boar. He is the male god of love as well as nature. Frey brings protection, luck, and peace to the home. Invoke him for matters of fertility, planting, horses, livestock, the sun, luck, protection of the home, and warmth. We've got Freya. Everyone is very familiar with Freya, goddess of nature, the sun, and love. Freya appears as a sensuous woman with red or blonde hair. Normally, she wears a green dress and rides a chariot pulled by cats. Freya can be invoked for matters of love and marriage. Invoke her for love, joy, protection, good fortune, and magical needs. We have Idun, goddess of spring and wells. Idun is a dark-haired, light woman who carries a basket of golden apples. She is a restorer of youth and vitality. Idun can be invoked for matters of healing, renewal, pregnancy, insight, and good fortune. We have Heimdall, the guardian. Heimdall is a dazzling, bright individual who's called the White God. He is silent and vigilant. Heimdall guards the mythic Bifrost Bridge to Asgard. Invoke him for matters of observation, vigilance, guardianship, and safe crossing over bridges, fjords, and ferries. Heimdall is also the Lord of the Centuries. We have Ul, the ski god. Ul is a master skier and archer. He moves across the land swiftly, and his arrow never misses its mark. Invoke him in matters of hunting, accuracy, and winter travel. He is a master at getting people through difficult terrain with ease. Hermod is Odin's messenger. Hermod can ride anywhere at amazing speed. Invoke him in matters of haste, speedy delivery, sending messages, and hasty travel. And I believe last on our list, yes, Loki the trickster. Loki is a mischievous god who is full of pranks, cunning, and wiles. Loki is also a master thief, shape changer, and sneak. Some invoke him in matters which require trickier stealth, but be careful. Loki may just play his tricks on you. Any thoughts on the gods here? Pretty self-explanatory list. This author drops the ending R on a lot of the gods' names, like Frey would typically in Old Norse be more like referred to as Freyr. The same with Uller. That's I think it's a linguistic difference, but face value, yeah, there are a short list of the most common gods. And here's the part where I think this is near the end, everybody, but I think this is the part where it gets kind of a little muddy. The views of the author are the views of the author. They're not the views of myself. But I felt if we were going to read some, we might as well read all. This is a perspective that exists in the world. It's very thin ice. It's a very gray area that often tends to be biased towards black on a binary of black and white. This we do have to be careful with, but I felt it was only right. If we're going to read some of what this author has to say, we might as well read all of it. So the heathen religions are the ancient beliefs of the various Germanic people. These are the ancestors of the Scandinavian, German, Austrian, Dutch, and English people. In fact, all the old lore is translated from those ancient languages. Most of it comes from Nordic, German, and Anglo-Saxon sources. It stands to reason that many heathens feel an ethnic connection as well as a spiritual one. Of course, one does not have to be German, Scandinavian, Dutch, or English to be heathen. To the contrary, heathenism is open to all who want it. Any who feel that this is their path may partake of it. For a few, heathenism is as much a religious choice as it is an ethnic expression. There are groups who prefer to focus on the ethnic aspect. These groups are referred to as folkish. They represent a small fraction of heathen organizations. Most of the folkish groups have limited membership to those connected to a specific Germanic ethnic group. The author says this is not racism, but exclusivity. Most heathen groups are open to all who come. However, we respect the rights of this author respects the rights of folkish groups to pursue their beliefs in their own way. The point is that whether you seek an ethnic aspect to heathenism or prefer open membership, you can find it. Heathens pride themselves on their individuality and their respect for the choices of others. We can spend the rest of this evening talking about the subtle racism implied here. But as a stand for an individual perspective and for representing the Ásatrú community well, oftentimes the folkish groups are tied to the Volkish movement, which is very racist, and we don't do heathenry that way around here. Anyone's open to practice. Anyone is welcome, and I think honestly, ethnic connections, ancestral connections are probably the least significant connections that we can express in the Ásatrú community. Our gods are bigger than our differences. And I believe a common shared faith in the gods and the practices of the old are probably far more significant than any ancestral connection. So just beware that is a perspective that exists in this world. However, it is not what the Ásatrú community believes, and on an individual level, it's not what I believe. And I believe that anytime you promote something that excludes other people, on the basis of things that they cannot change about themselves, you're a piece of shit, honestly. But I take. So, with that being said, I'll open it up for any kind of comments, concerns there.
I think that finding a connection through your ethnicity or roots to the gods is perfectly valid. That's how a lot of people get to heathenry, is that they go, okay, like, this is my heritage in some sense. What does this mean to me or for me? And that can be really significant and personally significant for people. And there's nothing wrong with that. In finding significance in that heritage. It's when you use that to exclude others. Um, that's that's about a personal significance, not about a broader community significance.
100% agree with that. Yeah, and I definitely don't mean to dissuade the significance of having an ancestral connection. It's really cool, you know. When you use that to exclude other people, that's when it becomes a problem, and that's why we take stands against organizations like the Ásatrú Folk Assembly, who actively promote exclusion from that ancestral heritage perspective. That's a very wrong thing to do. And if you look at the lore enough, um, this problem typically comes up in the modern times, in our times, within the Ásatrú sphere. Those Viking guys. It comes up in that sphere a lot. But honestly, if you look at Vikings as a job, there are non-white Vikings recorded in the lore. So, like, it loses its foundation on that basis alone, and it goes from there. If you found it because of your ancestry, awesome. Welcome aboard. If you're using that to exclude other people because of your ancestry, fuck you and get out of here. that kind of thing. So yeah.
Absolutely.
So that is kind of a broad stroke overview. And I think in my mind, when I read this PDF for the first time, for me personally, it was like, okay, I can pull out the few things that I disagree with on a personal level. But as a broad stroke, yes, this is a pretty good definition of heathenism. So what I'd like to do with the rest of our time that we spend on these classes is go through the lore books, take a couple of modern authors, and then at the end, right, this PDF here should mean something different, should have a little bit more. You can see the allegory within the lines for your individual faith. So with that being said, what I'll do now is share a different screen. So we'll stop sharing here. I have not written out. I've got it written out in syllabus type fashion. So it's easier to follow as we go through these different source texts. I haven't written out the weeks of study yet, but what I will do is I'll share my screen and give you a moment if you would like to screenshot what we have here. It's also posted in the Discord, but basically just kind of give a definition of what we're going to be spending our time on. So throughout the next 16 weeks, join us as we discover what it means to be an Ásatrú in the 21st century. The first 8 weeks, we're going to be spending time exploring ancient lore and practices of days gone by. We're going to cover pretty much all of the things outlined in that PDF. So from those lore texts, those source texts, we're going to naturally transition to what value these practices have in our daily lives as we read contemporary works by modern reputable authors. So I've got a text list here. Some of this stuff that if you want to participate, I can provide some of these in digital format to you. I always promote and recommend that you buy copies for yourself. Some of these I am not able to provide digital copies for. They are hard to find books, and you have to get them when they're available. Some of them are expensive, some of them are not. I will be pulling the paragraphs and putting them in kind of a study guide fashion. It's just the format that I'm used to as a prior college student that helped me learn. So we have the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. Throughout the Prose Edda, we'll be studying the influence of Christianity on heathenism, because while there are some things of value within the Prose Edda, there's also a very stark, blunt, visible Christian influence on the Norse heathen stories and heathenism within that time frame. I do have this file, Saga of the Volsungs. You're going to want to pick up a Gested Norm at some point in time. But again, for the source text, I'm going to be ripping the paragraphs out that we're specifically going to be targeting. That covers the bulk of the source text that we'll be looking at. Again, this is just an introductory class. It's not meant to be, high level, just to provide an introduction to Ásatrú and what it means to be an Ásatrúar in the 21st century. So that would be the source text. For the reputable authors that I've found, reputable being still somewhat loose. What I mean by reputable is they are not racist. They don't have strong ties to any known racist organizations. That's going to be Ásatrú for Beginners, Matthias Nordvig, host of the Nordic Mythology podcast. That one has come into somewhat hot water within the last little bit, but still some good stuff to glean from that book. Myth and Religion of the North, The Religion of Ancient Scandinavia by E.O.G. Turville Peter. That one's a difficult one to find, but again, I'll pull what we can from that and use it in study guide format. The Norse Myths, A Guide to the Gods and Heroes, and Tales of Norse Mythology by Helen Gerber. That Norse Myths, A Guide to the Gods and Heroes is by Carolyn Larrington, I believe. Very good book there that I've been digging into. So the first thing that we will want to study for this week, if you're going to be taking part in the study for next week, we're going to be digging into the Poetic Edda first. We're going to be studying more of the mainstream content first and foremost, just to kind of like get everyone bit and interested into it. So that the first 2 weeks that we're going to be spending on the source text, the lore text, is going to be spent on the Poetic Edda, specifically the Voluspa for this week. If we dig through the Voluspa in 1 week, cool. It's pretty hefty though. There's a lot to uncover in the Voluspa. And then after that, we'll take a look at the Havamal for ethics. So we have mythology, ethics, all bound in one for the first 2-3 weeks, hopefully. And if it takes longer, it takes longer. But that is pretty much all that I have for the introduction to Ásatrú. And if you guys have anything else that you'd like to add, now would be that time.